Oh, hmm. Okay. Hi, good evening, and welcome to this evening's edition of Dad Reads Stories. Today's story is titled Calypso Christmas, and it is from this book, Collected Short Stories of Ruskin Bond. So let us start. Story title Calypso Christmas. It goes like this. My first Christmas in London had been a lonely one. My small bed-sitting room near Swiss Cottage had been cold and austere, and my landlady had disapproved of any sort of revelry. Moreover, I hadn't the money for the theatre or a good restaurant. That first English Christmas was spent sitting in front of a lukewarm gas fire, eating beans on toast and drinking cheap sherry. My one consolation was the row of Christmas cards on the mantelpiece, most of them from friends in India. But the following year, I was making more money and living in a bigger, brighter, homelier room. I was making a homelier room. The new landlady approved of my bringing friends, even girls, to the house, and had even made me a plum pudding so that I could entertain my guests. My friends in London included a number of Indian and Commonwealth students, and through them I met George, a friendly, sensitive person from Trinidad. George was not a student, he was over 30. Like thousands of other West Indians, he had come to England because he had been told that jobs were plentiful, that there was a free health scheme and national insurance, and that he could earn anything from 10 to 20 pounds a week, for far more than he could make in Trinidad or Jamaica. Jamaica. But while it was true that jobs were to be had in England, it was also true that sections of local labor resented outsiders filling these posts. There were also those belonging chiefly to the lower middle classes who were prone to various prejudices. And though these people were a minority, they were still capable of making themselves felt and heard. In any case, London is a lonely place, especially for the stranger. And for the happy go lucky West Indian, accustomed to sunshine, color, and music, London must be quite baffling. This is the greatest thing about our countries. London was lonely because the West Indian is accustomed to sunshine, color, and music. At Austin, Siddharth's problem is sunshine is missing. For 10 months in a year, there is no sunshine. 2 months of summer, well, there is sun, but then it might go away any moment. So, as though to match the grey green fogs of winter, Londoners wore somber colors, greys and browns. The West Indians couldn't understand this. Surely they reasoned, during a grey season, the colors worn should be vivid reds and greens, colors that would defy the curling fog and uncomfortable rain. But Londoners frowned on these gay splashes of color. To them, it all seemed an expression of some sort of barbarism. So their expression of refinement was in wearing grey colors. And then again, Londoners had a horror of any sort of loud noise, and a blaring radio could quite justifiably bring in scores of protests from neighboring houses. The West Indians, on the other hand, liked letting off steam. The West They liked holding parties in their rooms at which there was much singing and shouting. They had always believed that England was their mother country, and so, despite rain, fog, sleet, and snow, they were determined to live as they had lived back home in Trinidad. And it and it is to their credit, even to the credit of indigenous Londoners, that this is what they succeeded in doing. George worked for British Railways. He was a ticket collector at one of the underground stations. He liked his work and received about £10 a week for collecting tickets. A large, stout man with huge hands and feet, he always had a gentle, kindly expression on his mobile face. Amongst other accomplishments, he could play the piano, and as there was an old, rather dilapidated piano in my room, he would often come over in the evenings to run his fat, heavy fingers over the keys, playing tunes that ranged from hymns to jazz pieces. I thought he would be a nice person to spend Christmas with. So I asked him to come and share the pudding my landlady had made and a bottle of sherry I had procured. Little did I realize that an invitation to George would be interpreted as an invitation to all George's friends and relations. In fact, anyone who had known him in Trinidad. But this was the way he looked at it. And at 8 o'clock on Christmas Eve, while a chilly wind blew dead leaves down from Hampstead Heath, I saw a veritable army of West Indians marching down Belsize Avenue with George in the lead. So George came with a veritable army of his people. Bewildered, I opened my door to them. And in streamed George, George's cousins, George's nephews, George's friends. They were all smiling and they all shook hands with me, making complimentary remarks about my room. Man, that's some piano. Hey, look at that crazy picture. This rocking chair gives me fever. And they took no time at all to feel and make themselves at home. Everyone had brought something along for the party. George had brought several bottles of beer. Eric, a flashy coffee colored youth, had brought cigarettes and more beer. Marianne, a buxom woman of 35, who called me darling as soon as we met and kissed me on the cheeks, saying she adored pink cheeks, had brought bacon and eggs. Her daughter Lucy, who was 16 and in the full bloom of youth, had brought a gramophone, while the little nephews carried the records. Other friends and familiars had also brought beer, and one enterprising fellow produced a bottle of Jamaican rum. That's good. Then then everything began to happen at once. Lucy put a record on the gramophone, and the strains of Bassin, okay, strains of Bassin Street blues filled the room. At the same time, George sat down at the piano to hammer out an accompaniment to the record. His huge hands crushed down on the keys as though he were chopping up hunks of meat. Marian had lit the gas fire and was busy frying bacon and eggs. Eric was opening beer bottles. In the midst of the noise and confusion, I heard a knock on the door, a very timid, hesitant knock, and opening it I found my landlady standing on the threshold. "Oh, Mr. Bond, the neighbors," she began, and glancing into the room, she was rendered speechless. "It's only tonight," I said. "They all go home after an hour. Remember, it's Christmas." She nodded mutely and hurried away down the corridor, pursued by something called Beep Bopaloola, that's my baby. That's the old song. Beep Bopaloola. I closed the door and drew all the curtains in an effort to stifle the noise. But everyone was stomping around on the floorboards, and I hoped fervently that the downstairs people had gone to the theatre. George had started playing playing Calypso music, and Eric and Lucy were strutting and stomping in the middle of the room, while the two nephews were improvising on their own. Before I knew what was happening, Marian had taken me in her strong arms and was teaching me to do the calypso. The song playing, I think, was Banana Boat Song. Banana Boat Song all night long, that one. Instead of the party lasting an hour, it lasted 3 hours. We ate innumerable fried eggs and finished off all the beer. I took turns dancing with Marian, Lucy, and the nephews. There was a peculiar expression they used when excited. "Fire!" they shouted. I never knew what that was supposed to mean and what was supposed to be on fire or what the exclamation implied. But I too shouted "fire!" and somehow it seemed a very sensible thing to shout. Perhaps their hearts were on fire, I don't know. But for all their excitability and flashiness and brashness, they were all lovable and sincere friends. And today, when I look back on my 2 years in London, that Christmas party is the brightest, most vivid memory of all. And the faces of George and Marian, Lucy and Eric are the faces I remember best. This happens to us also, the parties we used to have in Lagos. At midnight, someone turned out the light. I was dancing with Lucy at the time, and then in the dark, she threw her arms around me and kissed me full on the lips. It was the first time I had been kissed by a girl, and when I think about it, I am glad that it was Lucy who kissed me. When they left, they went in a bunch, just as they had come. I stood at the gate and watched them saunter down the dark, empty street. The buses and tubes had stopped running at midnight, and George and his friends would have to walk all the way back to their rooms at Highgate and Golders Green. After they had all gone, the street was suddenly empty and silent, and my own footsteps were the only sounds I could hear. The cold came clutching at me, and I turned up my collar. I looked up at the windows of my house and at the windows of all the other houses in the street. They were all in darkness. It seemed to me that we were the only ones who had really celebrated Christmas. That was one good Christmas night. Thank you.